You need to become comfortable with technology, and you need to be open to change and realize that it might not be instantaneous that you're comfortable with the newest, greatest technology.
Introducing Tom Lukowski, Vice President of Accessibility at Comcast.
I'd say the time you put in the beginning is well worth it in the end.
Bringing inclusion, independence, and empowerment to the X1 Xfinity box and remote control from Comcast.
Comcast brings the internet, TV, my love of broadcast and media all under one roof. So this seemed like and continues to feel like a great home for me to drive accessibility forward.
Blindability's team correspondent Simon Bonenfant meets up with Tom at the Accessibility Labs at Comcast.
Growing up, technology, there wasn't any iPhone or anything like that.
Talks about dealing with the changing technology.
Think about how has IRA changed things.
Yep.
I'm a big user of IRA in airports. IRA we make available as an employee accommodation here at Comcast, if you need it at work to read mail or whatever.
And from a blindness perspective, Tom gives advice that we can all use.
Build a network of resources that can help you along the way. If I get stuck, I have a network of people that I can contact and you recommend, and I say just go for it after that.
And now, please welcome Simon Bonenfant and Tom Lukowski. We hope you enjoy.
I was born blind, the youngest of 4 brothers, all of whom can see, so you can imagine what that was like. That was a fun childhood.
Hello everyone on Blindabilities, this is Simon Bonenfant here, and I'm at the Comcast building today in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm here at the Accessibility Lab with Tom Lukowski. How you doing, Tom?
Hey Simon, what's up?
I'm doing good.
Excellent.
So Tom, what is your role at Comcast?
So my role is Vice President of Accessibility at Comcast, and I lead a team that looks across all of our products and services to make sure that we're delivering as inclusive an experience as possible for all of our customers, and that includes customers with disabilities.
And you were blind as well?
Yes.
Can you touch on your journey and how you came into the tech market and how you came into Comcast?
Sure. So I was born blind, the youngest of 4 brothers, all of whom can see, so you can imagine what that was like. That was a fun childhood. And went off to Boston College. I was mainstreamed through public school. Thought I was going to do communications, going to get into radio and TV. Ended up wanting to stay in Boston. This is back several years ago now. And went to the public TV and radio station there on WGBH and was looking for work and learned about their media access group in this relatively new service at the time called Descriptive Video Service, or DVS. It turns out that the director at the time of DVS happened to be a Boston College alum, and so set up a 30-minute informational interview, and that turned into an hour-and-a-half conversation, and I ended up at that point taking a job with DVS in their outreach team. And really haven't looked back since. I spent 10 years at WGBH, went through DVS, then worked at the National Center for Accessible Media at WGBH, which was an R&D, research and development organization that, ironically, one of the projects I managed was creating guidelines on how to make cable set-top boxes accessible to people with disabilities. Who knew that several years later I would be doing that? And NCAM, or the National Center for Accessible Media, also had a corporate partnership program where companies would hire us to work as consultants, and the funding that we would make off of that would fuel additional research into multimedia and other areas of media accessibility. As part of that, AOL, America Online at the time, became one of our corporate partners, and I was fortunate to be able to be asked to manage that project. And so I helped them. They were sued by the National Federation of the Blind at one point. It would have been the first case under the ADA, under Title III, applying to the internet. It was settled, but as part of that, they created a Office of Accessibility at AOL. And I got to work with that director for a while. And then when she decided to move on, they hired me to run accessibility at AOL. So I left WGBH, moved down to Northern Virginia, ran accessibility for 10 years at AOL. And now we're at 2012, and Comcast was looking to create an accessibility office, and someone that I know, a friend of mine in the industry, heard about it. She called me up, said, "What do you think about moving to Philadelphia? Would you be interested in interviewing for the role?" And she gave me the contact information. Lo and behold, I interviewed, got the job, and now I'm coming up on 7 years as the Vice President of Accessibility at Comcast.
That's great. That's terrific. So when you were growing up, what was technology like, and did you always have the vision to make the TV accessible, or when did that first come to you that this is something that you wanted to do and this is something that was realistic for Comcast to do?
So growing up, technology, there wasn't any iPhone or anything like that, when I was growing up. So when I first learned to take notes, you'd take one of those APH tape recorders to class and you'd record your class, and depending on what type of class it was, you'd go back home and sometimes you'd transcribe your notes on a Braille writer, right? That's the old school way of doing things, right? And then technology really started to take off, right? That's right around the time when, I don't know if you've ever heard of the VersaBraille.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, the VersaBraille was a self-contained system that had a refreshable Braille display on it. And so I started using that to take notes. So now I didn't have to record anymore, right? I could just bring the VersaBraille with me everywhere I went. So I would say once I hit high school and college is when technology really started to take hold, but it was really more in the assistive technology space. There weren't talking ATMs, things like that we take for granted today. And so, I was always thinking about a career in communications, and being a musician, being a drummer in a band and things like that, I wasn't really thinking about technology. I think it really started to take shape for me once I was at WGBH and having the opportunity to work with a bunch of different technologies and really finding that to be very rewarding. And then certainly at AOL, and having been at WGBH and authored guidelines on how to make set-top boxes accessible, when Comcast called me up and I interviewed for the role and was fortunate enough to be given the role and be hired here, it seemed like it brought everything full circle. Comcast brings the internet, TV, my love of broadcast and media through our Comcast NBC Universal, all under one roof. So this seemed like and continues to feel like a great home for me to drive accessibility forward.
So when you came into Comcast, is that something that you thought of, or they said to you, we want to bring you in to make these accessible talking guides and things?
Well, they knew that there was going to be an increased focus on accessibility. And so, they had the forethought to say, look, we want to bring a subject matter expert into the company and into our product organization to help us figure out what we need to do from an accessibility perspective. So I think that's why they created the group. And then, once you come in, I started working with the product groups. And obviously, I already had personal experience with the challenges of trying to find programs with video description or trying to turn on the SAP channel to get at video description, to hear it. And so it just seemed like, the right place to start to focus on a talking guide and, making it easier to turn on closed captioning and video description and the features that we demoed earlier.
In the process of the X1 box being designed and a talking guide, how did your experience with being blind come into play, and did things evolve as time went on as you were designing, or did you already from the start have, we want this rate control to be in there and we want it to work like this, and the control, did you have it all mapped out, or did it kind of come out as the process was going, things kind of evolved?
There are certain table stake components of an accessible interface that screen readers support, and so we went into the project being fully aware of those needs and requirements, but certainly it evolved as we got feedback. And you could put 10 people who are blind in front of a product and get 10 different opinions on what it should do, and that's no different than putting 10 sighted people in front of a product and you might have 10 different opinions on what the experience should be. So yeah, it definitely evolves with usability testing, getting feedback from customers. You go through customer trials when we put the box in people's homes with the talking guide enabled, and we would do conference calls with the trial participants. They'd give us feedback, and we've adjusted a lot of things as a result. And we didn't get everything in the first shot either, right? We call minimal viable product. What could we go out of the gate with that would represent a credible experience And then you start to put a list of items together to incrementally evolve the product as you move forward.
And what was the one thing that you wanted to make sure that you had from your own experience?
The big thing for me is I don't want to have customers with disabilities have to work 2 or 3 times as hard as anybody else to get access to the same experience. We work pretty hard in school or at work to make sure that our screen readers or whatever assistive technology you're running, depending on your disability, and we spend a lot of time running to get up to the starting line in some cases. Mm-hmm. When you're at home chilling on the couch, you're not going to spend that energy. You don't have the energy to spend anyway. So we got to make it easy. And so for me, it just felt like we win when the accessibility is just fairly apparent and relatively easy to navigate. That's really kind of the North Star for me.
And what tools do you use now in technology for your computer and phone? You have an iPhone, correct?
I have both an iPhone and a Pixel device. So we test across both iOS and Android. We have Xfinity apps on both platforms, and so.
But you have app as well. And does the voice guidance work through the app, or does it rely on the screen reader of the phone?
We rely on the native support of the operating system. So VoiceOver for iPhone, TalkBack for Android, and whatever other accessibility features those 2 operating systems offer. Same thing on with the web. We work with JAWS, with NVDA, the latest web browsers we test as well.
So what computer do you use and what screen readers do you have on there?
So right now I have a Surface Pro running JAWS 2019 and the latest version of NVDA.
Good.
I have a Mac at home running VoiceOver.
Well, it's good to keep up with all that stuff.
Yeah. I do have a Refresher Braille 18-cell Braille display. I don't use it as really right now as much as I should. Still trying to find a Braille display that I really feel fits into how I like to work.
So last question here is, what advice would you give to a transition student transitioning to college, high school, college, or workplace, or someone who's newly blinded? What advice would you give from your experience being blind?
Boy, what advice would I give? I would say that you need to become comfortable with technology, and you need to be open to change and realize that it might not be instantaneous that you're comfortable with the newest, greatest technology, right? So it does take a little work, but I'd say the time you put in the beginning is well worth it in the end. And embrace new products and support organizations that have a strong commitment to accessibility. That's why when you were asking me about what I use, I don't really like to say what I use because I want to support all good work in this space. And so it's hard for me to say, well, I just decided on this one technology or whatever. I have different technologies for different needs, right? As a community, support the companies that really put an effort in the space because, they are working hard. A lot of companies are working hard to address accessibility, to advance employment of people with disabilities, and I think we need to recognize that we want to support that. And so I think the advice is be open, get comfortable with new technologies, be open to change, and ask. Build a network of resources that can help you along the way. If I get stuck, I have a network of people that I can contact and say, geez, you guys are tracking this stuff closer than I am. What should I be using? What do you recommend? And I say, just go for it after that.
And you mentioned change. I remember when the iPhone came out and it started coming out with VoiceOver, that was big in the blind community. A lot of people thought that was just off the limit. And there's probably going to be more change coming down the pipe in the next 5 to 10 years. Accessibility and technology in general is changing so rapidly. I remember just a few years ago with the Face ID, how is the blind going to use that home button? Or no headphone jack. It was just stuff that I never thought about.
They're doing the user research, as we are, and think about how has IRA changed things.
Yep, exactly.
I'm a big user of IRA in airports. IRA we make available as an employee accommodation here at Comcast. So, if you need it at work to read mail or whatever, you're not being...
So you use the glasses? Glasses?
Mostly I use the phone, but I do have the glasses.
Good. And is there any contact information that someone who is blind or visually impaired or anyone with disability could get in touch with the accessibility department of Comcast?
So we have a dedicated support team for customers with disabilities. You can reach us by phone at 855-270-8255. 0379 between 8 a.m. and midnight, 7 days a week. You can send an email to accessibility@comcast.com. You can also go to comcast.com/accessibility page and learn more about our efforts, and there you'll be able to link off to our support area where you can do accessible chat as well with our accessibility agents. Multiple ways you can contact us.
Oh, that's great. Well, Tom, thank you for talking with me, and I want to just say that your company has a very, very strong commitment to accessibility, and I know it's very important to you as is to me. And thank you for making everything very accessible for the blind and disabled community in general. So you're doing a good job with that.
Thank you, Simon, for getting the word out through Blind Abilities, and have you come back another time and we'll talk about smart home and stuff like that.
Cool. Very good.
Such a great conversation with Tom Ladowski. And stay tuned to our next podcast where Simon and Tom go over the X1 Xfinity box and remote control from Comcast. And I must say, such a great job by our teen correspondent, Simon Bonenfant. Simon's back in school, but he's going to be back on to talk about his experience at Colorado Center for the Blind that he had this summer. And for more podcasts with a blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com, on Twitter @blindabilities, and download the free Blind Abilities app from the App Store and the Google Play Store. That's 2 words, Blind Abilities. Enable the Blind Abilities skill on your Amazon device just by saying, enable Blind Abilities. A big shout out to Chi Chow for his beautiful music. You can follow Chi Chow on Twitter at @LChiChow. Most importantly, I want to thank you, the listener. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed. And until next time, bye-bye.
When we share
what we see
through each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap between
the limited expectations
and the
realities of blind abilities.
The realities of blind
abilities.
For more podcasts with a blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com, on Twitter @blindabilities, download our app from the App Store, Blind Abilities, that's 2 words, or send us an email at info@blindabilities.com. Thanks for listening.